Morse. People believe that prediabetes begins the day their fasting glucose reaches 126. That number feels official, clinical, and definitive. It creates a psychological boundary. Below it, you are not diabetic. Above it, everything changes. But when we are talking specifically about morning blood sugar, that line is misleading, because the metabolic transition does not begin at 126. It begins when your overnight regulation starts failing, and that shift often appears much earlier, usually in the range of 110 to 125. If you have been waking up with numbers like 112, 118, 121, or 124, especially on repeated mornings, what you are seeing is not just a number. It is the result of what happened inside your body for the last 7 to 9 hours while you were asleep. Morning blood sugar is unique because it is not reacting to a meal. It is not reflecting what you just ate. It represents baseline control. It shows how your liver behaved overnight, how responsive your insulin signaling was, and how effectively your body handled the natural hormonal rise that prepares you to wake up. If you care about protecting your metabolism before it crosses into diabetes territory, subscribe now. This channel is dedicated entirely to understanding what your morning blood sugar means and how to stabilize it before it progresses. Now let's go deeper. During the night, your body enters a fasting state. Even if you ate dinner, by the time you are several hours into sleep, digestion is complete and blood glucose should be stable. But stability does not mean inactivity. Your liver is constantly working. It releases small amounts of glucose into the bloodstream to keep your brain supplied with energy. This process is called hepatic glucose output, and it is normal. The problem begins when the liver releases slightly more glucose than necessary, and insulin is no longer suppressing that release efficiently. In early insulin resistance, this change is subtle. It is not dramatic. You do not feel pain. You do not notice obvious symptoms. But your morning numbers begin to creep upward. Perhaps you used to wake up at 92. Then gradually you notice 101. Later, 108 becomes common. Eventually, 118 feels typical. That upward shift is not random. It reflects decreasing insulin sensitivity at the liver level. And here is the critical distinction. Prediabetes is not defined metabolically by one number. It is defined by a repeated pattern of impaired overnight regulation. A single morning reading of 122 after poor sleep does not mean you have prediabetes, but waking up at 118 to 125 consistently, especially for a week or more, suggests that your overnight glucose control has shifted into a new baseline. That baseline is what matters. The official diagnostic category of 100 to 125 being prediabetes is not arbitrary. It reflects a range where insulin resistance is usually present. However, the real metabolic turning point often begins in the lower half of that range, particularly when the numbers are consistent. When 118 becomes your usual morning reading, your liver is likely oversupplying glucose throughout the night. To understand why this happens, we need to look at what occurs between roughly 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. During this window, cortisol levels naturally rise. Cortisol is not the enemy. It is a normal hormone that helps you wake up. It signals your liver to release glucose so that you have energy when you open your eyes. In a metabolically healthy system, insulin rises just enough to balance that glucose release. The result is a smooth transition from sleep to wakefulness, with fasting glucose remaining under 100. But in early prediabetes, insulin signaling is delayed or blunted. The liver responds strongly to cortisol, releasing glucose as instructed. However, insulin does not counterbalance it efficiently. The result is that you wake up higher than your body truly needs to be. This is why someone can eat carefully, avoid sugar, and still wake up at 121. The issue is not what they ate the night before. It is what happened hormonally during sleep. Morning blood sugar becomes prediabetes when this imbalance becomes the rule rather than the exception. If you're fasting, glucose reads 118 on Monday, 121 on Tuesday, 116 on Wednesday, 124 on Thursday, 119 on Friday. That is not fluctuation. That is pattern formation. Pattern formation means the liver has adjusted to a new regulatory setting. It is releasing more glucose overnight because insulin resistance has made suppression less effective. Over time, this repeated exposure to slightly elevated fasting glucose begins to affect other systems. The pancreas compensates by producing more insulin. Cells become gradually less responsive. Fat storage becomes easier. Energy levels upon waking feel unstable. Many people notice subtle signs during this stage. They wake up tired even after adequate sleep. They feel mentally foggy in the first hour of the morning. They crave coffee not just for alertness, but to feel normal. They may even feel slightly shaky before breakfast. These sensations are not always dramatic, but they reflect underlying instability in morning glucose regulation. Prediabetes does not suddenly appear. It develops in layers. The first layer is rising morning glucose due to hepatic insulin resistance. The second layer is compensatory hyperinsulinemia, the pancreas increasing insulin output to manage that glucose. The third layer is systemic insulin resistance, affecting muscle and fat tissue. This is why waiting for 126 as the signal to act can delay intervention significantly. When does morning blood sugar truly become prediabetes? It becomes prediabetes when your overnight baseline rises consistently above your historical norm and stabilizes within the 110 to 125 range. Let's break this down more precisely. If your consistent morning average is under 100, regulation is typically intact. If your consistent morning average is between 100 and 109, early insulin resistance is likely beginning. If your consistent morning average is between 110 and 118, hepatic insulin resistance is strongly suspected. If your consistent morning average is between 118 and 125, metabolic instability is established and prediabetes is actively developing. Notice that this progression is gradual. It is not about crossing one line. It is about shifting baseline. And that shift happens while you sleep. Every night, your liver decides how much glucose to release. Every night, insulin attempts to regulate that release. Every night, cortisol rises before dawn. Your morning number is the report card of that interaction. If your morning glucose used to be 94 and is now 121 most days, something has changed metabolically. Even if your A1C is still considered borderline, the trend matters. Trends are more powerful than isolated readings. One of the biggest mistakes people make is dismissing repeated 118 to 125 readings. Because they are not officially diabetic, but metabolically, that range reflects ongoing insulin resistance. It is the stage where reversal is still highly achievable, but only if recognized. Morning blood sugar is often the earliest visible sign because it isolates overnight physiology. It strips away dietary noise. It reveals how your body behaves in its most controlled state. If that controlled state is drifting upward, it means your internal regulation is changing. Let's talk about progression over time. Morning glucose rarely jumps dramatically. It climbs in increments. Perhaps you notice occasional 105 readings. Months later, 112 becomes more frequent. Then 118 appears regularly. Eventually, 123 feels typical. Each stage can feel subtle, easy to rationalize, but the cumulative effect is significant. When 118 to 125 becomes stable for weeks, your system is no longer oscillating around a healthy baseline. It has recalibrated upward. That recalibration is what defines prediabetes metabolically. Not fear, not labels, not a single spike, but recalibrated overnight glucose control. And this is why morning blood sugar is such a powerful early warning system. It tells you about the future trajectory of your metabolism before more serious dysfunction sets in. If nothing changes, the pattern tends to continue. 118 becomes 124. 124 becomes 131. 131 becomes persistent elevation. But the earlier stage, the 110 to 125 range, is where intervention has the highest probability of restoring full stability. The key insight is this. Prediabetes is not a sudden event that starts at 126. It is a process that becomes visible in the morning long before that. If you are waking up consistently between 118 and 125, you are in metabolic transition. Not yet diabetes, but no longer fully normal. And that transition is happening every night. D. The good news is that because the issue originates overnight in liver output and insulin signaling, it is often highly responsive. 2 targeted lifestyle shifts that improve hepatic insulin sensitivity, but recognition must come first. So, if you have been looking at your morning numbers and wondering whether 118, 121, or 124 truly matters, the answer is yes. Not because it defines you, but because it defines your current metabolic direction. Morning blood sugar becomes prediabetes when it becomes your new normal. And that normal is established in the dark while you sleep. If this helped clarify what your fasting glucose is really telling you each morning, subscribe. This channel exists to help you decode those numbers early, before they progress further. Your morning blood sugar is not random. It is the clearest signal your metabolism gives you. The question is whether you will act while it is still reversible.